Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel. So if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land, we're here for you. I'm Ladar Gavelazi, and this is ILTV's Weekly Review. Israel is close to achieving its war goals in Gaza, and the war with Iran is ongoing. Those are the messages from Defense Minister Israel Katz at a key assessment held with top IDF brass. ILTV's Steve Leibovitz has the story.
During an assessment with IDF Chief Eyal Zamir and senior officers, Defense Minister Katz indicated that Israel may consider resuming its campaign against Iran. The defense minister stressed the need for Israel to maintain air superiority, which was achieved during Operation Rising Lion, the 12-day war between Israel and Iran. Katz said there must be an effective enforcement plan to prevent Iran from restoring its nuclear and missile programs. A report in today's New York Times says that the Iranian government suspects Israel with being responsible for a series of mysterious fires at oil refineries and apartment complexes reported almost daily in Tehran in recent days. Turning to Gaza, Defense Minister Katz insisted Israel was close to achieving its war objectives, including the return of all hostages and the defeat of Hamas. It's day 656 of the war in Gaza. The IDF said the current ground operation in Deir el-Balah is nearly complete. A soldier was reportedly seriously wounded by an anti-tank missile in central Gaza while tending to a combat vehicle. According to the army, forces have already begun to withdraw from the area they only entered in recent days. Elsewhere in Gaza, in Khan Yunis, the Kfir Brigade uncovered and seized weapons, including grenades, mortars, and tactical communications equipment. In northern Gaza, the 98th Division is continuing operations in the Sejaiya and Zaytur areas, with airstrikes reportedly killing about a dozen gunmen in the past 24 hours. The Air Force struck dozens of terror targets across the Strip, including booby-trapped buildings, anti-tank launch positions, combat terror tunnels, and other infrastructure.
And American, Israeli, and Qatari and Egyptian negotiators are still waiting on Hamas to respond to the latest Gaza ceasefire deal proposal that was delivered to them last week, according to Axios. They also report Hamas officials in Doha are leaning towards supporting the proposal, but there's still no clear response from Hamas leadership inside of the enclave. A senior U.S. official tells Axios that Israel is bending over backwards to reach an agreement, and Hamas leaders are being hard-headed, saying if there is no agreement this time, it will be entirely Hamas's fault. Another U.S. official tells Axios every day that Hamas delays their response, more Palestinians die, saying, quote, "Who do they think they are? Hundreds of Palestinians have been killed since they received the new proposal last week." Adam Buller, the Trump administration's special envoy for hostage response, said on CNN if Hamas does not act towards a ceasefire and return the hostages in Israel, Israel is going to take action. Buller also emphasized the need to get 2 American hostages out of Gaza, Itai Khan and Omer Nutra.
And joining us now with more on the latest developments is Colonel Miri Eisen from the International Institute for Counterterrorism at Reichman University. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Adar.
So I want to start with the question on Syria. Before we get into the latest with Gaza, Israel and Syria have agreed to a ceasefire, but the danger certainly far from over. What can we expect next with regards to Syria?
It's not exactly up to us, and we need to realize that. The challenges that are inside Syria pre-existed everything that has to do with Israel. Syria is made up out of a lot of different ethnic groups, religious groups, and the clash that we've seen over almost a week between Bedouin, Sunni, and between the Druze is something that you've seen inside Syria for years, and may I remind everybody, almost 13 years of a horrific civil war. Israel stepped in on behalf of Druze. We have our Druze population, and this is also in southern Syria near us. I am more worried about what will happen by the Syrians themselves. Right now, the Druze, Syrian Druze inside that arena did not allow in a government convoy. They only allowed in what is a Red Crescent, like a Red Cross, a Red Crescent convoy. So it's still not yet stabilized.
Unfortunately, we'll continue to follow what's happening in Syria, but I want to turn now to Gaza. A major development on this front For the very first time since the beginning of the war over a year and a half, the IDF has now issued evacuation orders for Deir al-Balah, an area that has remained largely untouched ahead of a ground invasion. What can you tell us? What is the significance of this move, and why only now?
When you talk about why only now, it's that when you go out, in this case, we've done things systematically against different strongholds of Hamas. This is really one of the last strongholds that the Israeli Defense Forces have not yet touched, again, by ground. That doesn't mean that it's not been attacked by artillery or by air. Having said that, this is keeping Hamas off balance. Let everybody be clear. Hamas should not be defining not the rules of the game, not the rules of the war. They shouldn't be defining anything. And in taking such an action, the IDF, the Israeli military, the government are saying we're the ones who are going to be on the initiative and not Hamas. And that means going into a new arena. It's always challenging militarily. I think it's a very important step.
And are there other areas in Gaza that are also untouched by the IDF ground forces?
In that area near Deir al-Balah, in that same what we call the central area, which is where on the one hand there are almost 1 million displaced people that Israel told to move from 2023 to an area near the seashore, the Muasi, and there you have almost 1 million people that are both in houses but also in a lot of tents. Deir al-Balah is a town, I really should say it's a very large city, which has not yet been attacked, evacuated by Israeli forces. That means that Hamas's underground subterranean arena, all of the different positions that we talk about, their capability to make weapons are now inside these last strongholds of Hamas that have not been touched by the IDF ground forces.
And regarding the hostages as well, U.S. President Trump once again expressing optimism that a ceasefire deal is imminent. How would this affect the IDF's operations in Deir al-Balah should a ceasefire now take effect?
If a ceasefire takes into effect, it's a ceasefire that would stop that kind of an initiative. We've already been, sadly, in situations like this where we've heard cautious optimism, sometimes open optimism that have not led to anything. And on the other hand, we've also been in ceasefires, and in those ceasefires, we have seen hostages come home. So I'm going to be hopeful, but I'm going to be a hopeful pessimist. If there is a ceasefire, that would stop the IDF action. If there is a ceasefire, I would expect to see hostages coming home. I don't know about all of them, but at least some of them.
All right, Colonel Mary Eisen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And Hamas has reportedly given a disappointing response to the current ceasefire and hostage deal on the table. Mediators in Qatar and Egypt are reportedly pressuring the terror group to provide an improved response so that negotiations may continue. Meanwhile, in a sign of hope today that a ceasefire and hostage deal is possible in the near future, the U.S. State Department spokesperson announced U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff was en route to the region. Witkoff, who has been instrumental in securing deals with Hamas in the past, will likely stop in Europe first. ILTV's Shosh Bedrosian is tracking the developments. Shosh, bittersweet news today, but the U.S. still expressing optimism, so Witkoff's on the move. Is this the first true sign a deal may be imminent?
Well, Lidar, is certainly an optimistic sign. In recent times and in recent history, every single time Steve Witkoff headed to Doha, Qatar, it was likely that there was some sort of deal that they were closing in on. He will likely be heading to the region very, very soon, but that will not be his first stop once he leaves the United States starting today.
In my conversation with the Secretary, he has noted that Special Envoy Witkoff is heading to the region now, to the Gaza area. And we all have, as the President and the Secretary and the Envoy, a strong hope that we will come forward with another ceasefire, as well as a humanitarian corridor for aid to flow, that both sides have in fact agreed to this.
A big announcement from the State Department as Witkoff is en route to the region. But first, he'll be heading to Europe today for meetings and will wait there for an update on the progress on the negotiations for a ceasefire and hostage deal taking place in Doha. But Hamas has still not responded to the proposal they were offered last week, after U.S. hostage envoy Adam Boehler made it clear Israel has been bending over backwards for Hamas to agree to a deal. The talks are currently stalled as Hamas terror leaders in Doha have not been able to reach the Hamas wing inside of Gaza. Some experts worry the new ground offensive inside of Deir al-Balah could stall talks even more if senior Hamas officials are located there. But as pressure is on to get a deal, the terror group Palestinian Islamic Jihad claims they lost contact with the captors who are holding Israeli hostage 21-year-old Ron Broslavsky, and his fate is unknown. Just a few months ago, PIJ released Broslavsky's first sign of life, but no update on his whereabouts have been released since. Broslavsky's family released a statement in response to the announcement, demanding they want to know where their son is and that the military and government leaders in Israel have not responded to their messages or have updated them. Meanwhile, after 5 months in the hospital, released hostage Avera Mengistu is now back home. His family says he has undergone a significant healing process after being released from Hamas captivity in February after he was held in the Gaza Strip for 10 years. Now, there's definitely some hesitancy to believe the Palestinian Islamic Jihad with what they say about this Israeli hostage, Ron Broslavsky. That's because we've seen in the past Hamas and PIJ have both said things which have not come to fruition and have not been true. Recently, Hamas said that they lost contact with the captors of American hostage Idan Alexander, and just less than a month later, he was actually released alive from captivity. Lidar?
And thank you, Shosh, for the report. We have to remember that we are dealing with a terrorist organization after all.
And joining us now to discuss the situation in Syria and Gaza is Dr. Nir Balms, a Syria researcher at Dayan Center at Tel Aviv University. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Good to be here.
I first want to talk about the new regime leader in Syria. The U.S. is trying to normalize ties with them after the fall of the Assad regime, seeing it as a new pathway forward for the Middle East. But Druze say the new leader's government forces were the ones involved in massacring the Druze just last week. Does this leader really want peace or want to return back to the old ways of a regime?
Well, I'm not sure if this answer is yet to be concluded, but certainly if we're following the events of last week and the events in April, in May, and in March beforehand at Latakia, at the coastal area with the Alawites, we've certainly seen a very difficult track record. The videos we've seen, and I think a lot of the difficult videos were not the ones showing on TV, but from contact with Syrian colleagues and friends, this has been very, very difficult pictures to see. These were atrocities of the worst kind. And these atrocities, particularly last week, were conducted by soldiers under the Ministry of Defense of the Syria, which really means the Syrian military, but really by militias that were mandated by the Syrian military to, quote unquote, create order and actually create a disorder. There are more details on what had happened there, because this it's not linear, and it's not that this is completely unprovoked. There were things that had happened in the middle, but it's clear that this particular administration does not have for sure the control over some of the soldiers and the militias that were there. The question of intent remains somewhat open, because if you were trying to be somewhat rational about this, it is very difficult in the middle of a massacre. It's not that President Bashar now would like to, that his own vision will collapse and that he's going to alienate the entire world that has given him credit to rebuild Syria. This is a very bad event for him as well.
First of all, and I also want to talk about, how do you analyze Israel's role with these clashes that happened when it comes to Israel defending the Druze? What's your take on that? We know President Trump was caught off guard by some of these strikes the IDF conducted, but if Israel didn't get involved, what do you think would have happened?
Well, I think the issue is not whether Israel will or will not get involved, but how it will get involved. The protection of the Druze has to do with another broader principle of not letting militias and weapons to get closer to the Israeli border. Israel said it would like to see a demilitarized zone south of Damascus, and with a line that basically goes all the way to Sweda. a regime can be tested by its approach to women, by its approach to minorities, and then we will see if this regime is moderate or not. And I think in this case, the approach, particularly to minorities, shows something about the nature, at least, of this particular phase in the life of Syria. So Israel said that he's also going to protect the Jews. And of course, we have a very active and large Druze community, and we feel very connected to them. So we have some responsibility for that. But remember that protecting the Druze does not mean that we need to bomb Damascus. And protecting the Druze does not mean that we need to maneuver ourselves into a position that now the Druze community and the Syrian community are becoming even further isolated. It could be that there's a different course of action, could have perhaps prevented the massacre, and enable the solution on a longer term, because otherwise now we may be in an expectation to create a proxy force with the Druze or to continue to defend the Druze, because it's going to be very difficult to imagine, unless there's going to be a really quick process of reconciliation, that the Druze who needs to live in Syria will now continue to go back to Damascus. We've already seen the Druze students were attacked. The animosity at this point is at all-time high, and Israel had put itself right in the middle of it.
Interesting perspective there. I want to turn to the situation inside of Gaza. Hamas has still not responded to the ceasefire and hostage proposal they received last week from negotiations. Why is this? Why have they not responded yet?
I'm not privy to the internal communication within the ranks of Hamas, but I think Hamas still, in one way or another, expects that some intervention, international intervention, because of the pressure, because of the pictures we see, because of the issues with food in Gaza, will eventually put pressure on Israel to create additional flexibility. It seems that Hamas is not willing to stop this, and it could be that the leadership in Gaza and the leadership in Qatar do not see everything eye to eye. There has been a number of opportunities to try to end this and move to a day after scenario. And we know that even if we would move to a day after scenario, it's not that we find all the solution. It's not that it's linear. Not everything is implemented. But Hamas, at least so far, by all indication, seems to decide not to make a decision or to make some statements that they're about to, and they will at some point respond, or that something is not fitting with them. It's also clear that eventually the Israeli position want to make sure that Hamas is out, and Hamas is not willing to accept it, although they indicate that they're willing to accept something that will bring a scenario of a pseudo win-win. So another force will be there. Hamas is not going to be there by statement, but actually going to be there by practice. And when these details are not hashed up, Hamas said that it's not given up. And that also means that the operation needs to continue, and that the hostages, our hostages, are still not at home.
Dr. Nirbaum, thank you so much for being with us today. Appreciate your perspective.
And a fire near an ancient church in Taibe sparked global outrage. But now, new findings are raising serious questions about what actually happened. ILTV's executive editor is in Taibe with the report. Mayan, what can you tell us?
I'm standing here at the St. George Church in Taibe, an ancient and holy site that has become the heart of an international controversy. But despite claims that hate-filled arson filled the facility, there is no damage here. Absolutely none. And new evidence is challenging the assumption that any crime was caused by Jewish residents of Judea and Samaria. Just days ago, headlines around the world accused Jewish residents from nearby communities of setting this church ablaze. But Israeli police now say the church was never touched. The Israel police said that contrary to false reports, no damage or harm was caused to the holy site itself. Findings gathered on the grounds unequivocally show that. So what actually happened? According to police, a brush fire broke out in an open field near the church, but never reached its walls. No buildings, crops, or religious infrastructure were harmed. And then came the twist. Social media videos showed young Jewish men arriving at the scene, not to start the fire, but to try to put it out. One teen, seen holding a fire blower, was accused of setting the blaze, but reports say the same person may have been helping to contain it. The video confirms it. The church is completely intact. No burn marks, no damage. The narrative had gone viral before the facts were confirmed. Mike Huckabee, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, had initially condemned the incident strongly, but he later clarified he does not know who started the fire, only that if it was arson, it must be punished. He posted on X that the investigation reveals no damage to the ancient church in Taipei. I have not attributed the cause or fire to any person, he wrote, as we do not know for sure. The press has. The Binyamin Regional Council called it a modern blood libel and praised Huckabee for correcting the record. Council head Israel Gantz warned that false accusations like this are part of a broader campaign to drive a wedge between Israel and its Christian allies. The investigation is still ongoing, but here on the ground, the smoke has cleared, and so has the misinformation. Back to you.
Thank you, Mayan, for that very important report.
And we have new information coming out about the massacres against the Druze community in Syria right now. An American citizen is now confirmed as one of the victims that were rounded up by government forces and executed in the Druze city of Sweda, alongside his family members. 35-year-old Hussam Saraya was an American Syrian and part of the Druze community, the ethnic group that was targeted by Bedouin tribes, government forces, and other militia groups in Syria last week during these clashes. Now, family members say Saraya was in a home last week when government forces came back inside of the home, claiming they were searching for weapons when 8 men inside were rounded up and taken outside, leaving all of the women inside of the home. A family member described them as being kidnapped, and 12 hours later, a video emerged on social media of the 8 men being executed. The video shows men in uniform shouting, "God is great," while shooting all 8 men. Saraya studied accounting and finance in Oklahoma, and according to his Instagram, he became an American citizen in 2023 and was the founder and CEO of a school in Sweda. State officials in Oklahoma confirmed his death on social media, with the U.S. Senator James Lankford saying, quote, he's heartbroken, and said Saraya was, quote, an Oklahoman and a member of the Druze community. Congressman Markwayne Mullin says he's working with partners in the region to learn more and that they're in touch with the governor of Oklahoma.
For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at ILTV.tv or download the ILTV Plus app. That's it for ILTV's weekly review. See you next week.